Hello and welcome to the Get Creative podcast, the podcast for creatives by creatives. I'm Evan Schmidt, and my guest today is Mike Lenz. He's a fellow professional voice actor, podcast producer, and host. Hey Mike, thanks for coming on the show today. So tell the world who Mike Lenz is.
Thank you, Evan, and thanks for having me on your show. You were a guest on my podcast previously, so it's nice to be on kind of the other end of the microphone here. My name, as you said, is Mike Lenz. I guess at my heart, I'm a creative and I'm an entrepreneur. And the way that's manifesting itself at this point in my life is as a voice actor. I'm a professional voice actor. I do a lot of e-learning work, a lot of corporate narration, industrial videos, audiobook work, a fair amount of that, and some commercial work as well. And that keeps me pretty busy. And in addition to that, I do podcasting as well. I have my own podcast that I host, the Mike Lenz Voice, a journey into voice acting podcast, and that, as I mentioned, you've been a guest on. And my path has taken me into the world of producing podcasts. So I have a number of clients that I now produce and co-host their podcasts with them and for them and with them, and also do some consulting on some other podcasts. So primarily right now, focus is on voice acting and podcasting.
So as a creative, a producer, an entrepreneur, what's one thing, it could be two things too, what's something really good that you've learned?
Well, there's been so many things that we learn along the way, but I think probably the one thing that sticks with me is that somebody had told me once, and this was somebody that was outside of the creative world. He wasn't somebody that was in voice acting or in acting or really any of the creative arts, but he said, never underestimate the power of serendipity. And I love that line, and I use it frequently. And the story, that kind of the backstory to it, was that he was meeting with someone and he was embarking on a new consulting venture, and he didn't really know where to begin. And this person that he met with told him that. And he said, I want you to get in the boat. And when you get in the boat, you often think, well, I've got to get across this body of water to this destination on the other side. And you start to sail, or you push off from shore, and the current takes you, or the wind starts to blow, and you get a little off course, and you work so hard to try to sail or row back to that other spot that you think you're supposed to be at. And he said, I don't want you to do that. When you get in the boat, just go and let the boat take you where it's going to take you, and see where the journey takes you. And I know from in my own life that just following that advice or that path where I think I know where I want to go, but then something happens and it pushes me in another direction, is trying to allow serendipity to kind of play its course out and see where it takes me. And it's done that in the VO world, and it's certainly doing that for me in the podcasting world. And I know one of your previous guests had talked about the power to say no to things. Don't always say yes to everything, because then you lose the ability to focus on the things that you really want to do. And I think that's really good advice. But kind of a counterpoint to that is that when you do begin some journey, whatever it may be, especially if it's a different direction that you're taking, I think there is some power in not saying no to anything for a period of time, to be open to any suggestion that somebody has, because you really don't know where that path is going to take you. And it's only after you travel down a bit that you can connect the dots. I think it's Steve Jobs that said we can never connect the dots going forward. We can only connect them going back. And when you look back on your life, you realize all the things that had to happen to get you to the point where you are. And you realize you probably never could have gotten there if you had tried to figure it out all ahead of time. So never underestimate the power of serendipity. I think it's a powerful phrase, and it's something that I try to apply to my life every day.
I love it. And like you, it's kind of like everything is one or the other. So like the saying no to things or saying yes to things, and, saying yes to things, like you said, saying no at all or not saying no at all, brings me back to one of our mutual friends, Bob Sauer. He says, invite the avalanche. So it's kind of like just for a period of time, try to take all that you can and just see what happens. Like invite the avalanche, ask for it to happen, and, see how close you actually get to it. And then you might have a huge return on investment there.
Oh, no question. And I have other friends in other fields that this good friend of mine, she says that her favorite phrase is, "I'm blessed to be stressed." And I love that phrase too, because she's somebody that's a lifelong learner. She's in the learning industry, and she takes on volunteer projects. She's creating her own podcast. She does instructional design, and she's got her master's, and she's now working on her PhD because she just wants to learn all the time. And she understands the power of stretching herself through volunteering. And, in her mind, look, I want to take in as much as I can and soak it all up. And again, there's power in that. And, you can't burn yourself out, but for a short period of time, I really do think, especially like I said, when you're starting on a new venture, you may have an idea, a preconceived notion of where you want to go. But most of the time, when you talk to people who have gained some level of success in whatever industry they're in, many of them will tell you that the path didn't travel the way they thought it was going to, but it ended up in a good place, but they couldn't have known it when they started. So you really have to embrace that serendipity.
Nice. So where is the serendipity coming at you right now?
Well, I'm doing a whole bunch of different stuff, and I am definitely blessed to be stressed. And we were talking before before we went on the air. Just picked up another e-learning client of mine that's now an international client. So I had to figure out how to actually send an invoice and get it paid through the international world, so I'm such a big deal now that I have an international client, but I'm a legend in my own mind. But the world of podcasting is just exploding for me in a great way. I've got my own podcast, as I mentioned, and was contacted by somebody about 6 or 7 months ago who knew I was a voice actor and knew I had my own podcast, and asked if I could help him create a podcast and co-host it with him. So I had to relearn that whole process. And when I started podcasting 2.5 years ago, didn't really know anything about it. So I'm completely self-taught. So I had to reteach myself how to teach somebody else, and to actually produce it and co-host it was, a little more responsibility than just doing it for myself. So having been through that process, that led me to getting another client now who I'm in the process of creating a radio show / podcast. So it will be a radio show, but also live as a podcast evergreen on a website that we're creating for her. And that led me to create Podcast Snap, which is over at podcastsnap.com. And that's where I have a small team of people that I put together where we can help people produce their podcast, possibly co-host them, and help them work through the whole process from concept all the way up to launch. And that has really been something, as I mentioned, serendipity. When I started in the VO world, and certainly when I started my own VO podcast, never thought that I would be being hired and creating a company that would have clients that I was helping them do their podcasting for them. But it's something that has opened up to me, and I'm fully embracing it and enjoying every minute of it.
Nice. Where can people find you and the podcast and reach out to you if they want to?
Yeah, probably the best place, the central location would be my website, which is MikeLenzVoice.com. That's MikeLenz voice.com. And there are links to all of my social media sites there. As I mentioned, podcastsnap.com if you're looking for more information about the podcasting world. And you can check out my podcast, Mike Lenz Voice, A Journey into Voice Acting. Also the Learning Innovations podcast with Doug Boucher. And coming soon, hopefully this coming November, the Get Set Free Now with Patty Cepeda show. And and those are the places where you can find me. So go over to MikeLenzVoice.com and connect with me on social media. I'd love to connect with you.
Well, Mike, thanks for making time this evening to talk to me and the audience and getting creative with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Evan, for having me on.
That's it for another episode of Get Creative. You can find more information about my guest in the show notes. Be sure to subscribe so that you get the next episode in your sleep. And please give the show a review. For more information about me, go to evanschmidt.com, follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn, and watch my vlog on YouTube where I share lessons that I've learned. Thank you for listening. Now go get creative.